Somehow, people still believe things like this.
Let me make something clear. George Lucas did not make this TV show. This show was made by people who really don't like the prequel trilogy.
What did he say?
Depending on the fan they are, EU, original trilogy, prequels, or Disney Star Wars, love it or hate it, they'll credit either Dave or George for making the Clone Wars. So the question is, how much contribution did these two really have? All my sources found in the description are straight from direct interviews of the cast and production crew of the Clone Wars, including George and Filoni themselves. So while creating episode 3, George regretted that he couldn't expand the Clone Wars lore because it didn't have a direct correlation to Anakin's main story. He loved the 2003 micro-series titled Clone Wars, but much like the rest of the expanded universe material, George outsourced the licensing to Cartoon Network and had no real involvement in its creation whatsoever. This is confirmed by the complete absence of George's name anywhere in the credits of the microseries, because it was Genndy Tartakovsky who directed and produced the show. But as mentioned earlier, Lucas wanted to create his own version of the Clone Wars as a kind of footnote to Anakin Skywalker's character, while also using this as a way to experiment further with 3D animation. Thus, we come to the creation of The Clone Wars, to which George Lucas is credited as the creator and executive producer. The executive producer normally has much less involvement in each stage of production, instead focusing on finances, which people use to discredit his involvement. However, George is not solely credited as executive producer, but also as creator, meaning he's both creatively and financially responsible for the entire series. Just like the prequels and original trilogy films, he had a hand throughout the entire creative process as a final sign-off to many aspects of the show. Dave Filoni is quoted saying George helped establish the show's feel and was very hands-on with many of the core decisions, especially in the beginning, actively storyboarding with the team and helping cut sequences of episodes. But the narrative that George completely gave Filoni free range to the Clone Wars in the later seasons isn't true either. Although that was the original idea, this ended up happening.
George himself was like, I'm only going to do 8 episodes, and you only have to do 8, cut to years later we've done 100 episodes, and because everyone just loved it so much.
Dave himself even said in 2012, on par with the release of season 5, that although he saw George less as the show went on, he would always be involved, creating major plot points in the show's biggest story arcs, like Anakin having a Padawan, Maul returning from the dead, the Lost Droid arc, and even creating the idea of Clone Force 99, which originally was planned to be one of the last story arcs but was never finished before the show's cancellation, as well as watching the story wheels of developing episodes, giving key advice and feedback on what to fix, and watching finalized versions of episodes with Dave. Plus, it's not just from the production team saying this. Other anecdotal stories from the cast members involving George are everywhere online, like for example, Sam Witwer saying that he loved chatting with George about his character and even upcoming future arcs like the season 6 finale about the Wills, and much more stories like this on James Arnold Taylor's channel.
And then he hangs up the phone and says, okay, George just said, and we're like, wait a second. George, yes.
The point is, it's undeniable that George created the Clone Wars and was keenly involved in its creation throughout the entire 6 seasons of its production. But it now begs the question, how much of the show's success is accredited to Dave Filoni? With his recent flops like The Book of Boba Fett, Mando Season 3, and Ahsoka, you might think the answer's obvious, but that's not completely fair to Dave, since he's once again moving into a new storytelling medium with skills that don't directly translate. Just like in the beginning of Clone Wars, Dave came from working on The Last Airbender, a 2D animated show, to The Clone Wars, a fully 3D animated series, which at the time was still very new for television. So after being hired by Lucasfilm, he worked for a week as an animator on the show before being moved to supervising director, and was taken under George's wing as his young successor in a way, going on to be credited as the showrunner for every episode of The Clone Wars on IMDb, meaning he was the one making sure that everyone was creating the episode as closely as possible to what George envisioned it to be. Dave would also guide the voice actors in their recording sessions, as well as using his previous skills to sketch ideas and character designs, leading to creations like Ahsoka and the Wolfpack's designs, which by the way, he specifically directed the episodes introducing both of these characters. Although he only officially directed 9 episodes, the most notable being Clone Cadets and The Wrong Jedi, and was co-writer on one episode plus adding dialogue for 3 others, it's clear that he was present for the entire production with the power to make important changes. Like for example, Dave suggesting to Lucas that Ahsoka, instead of returning to the Jedi Order, she remained expelled to survive Order 66. But Lucas would most often have the final say even when Dave thought otherwise on important story beats. Like for example how Dave wanted the Clone Wars to focus on a group unrelated to the main cast like in Star Wars Rebels, wanting Ahsoka to be Obi-Wan's apprentice, and so on. All of which were eventually overruled by George. That's not to say George's ideas are always perfect, but he's the type of leader that continually tried to push the medium of digital storytelling to its limits.
Everything is done at a feature level, even though it's going on television. Being young and impressionable, he said, well, you can't do that.
Did I say that? Would I say that? I would just
do that. How are we going to do that? It's impossible.
While also giving chances for his production team to grow on their own by giving them creative freedom when developing storylines, leading to some of the most unforgettable arcs of the series that the team produced. So clearly Dave, with the right team, can create some amazing Star Wars, as he did being the writer of the last 4 episodes of season 7. Heck, I gotta say that those are the best episodes of the Clone Wars. But without an ambitious mastermind like George, it's easy to fall flat on executing great ideas. Disney is no stranger to safe storytelling and usually have a clear political agenda behind many of their motifs. So having people from the Clone Wars, like Dave, work on stuff like Ahsoka, Rebels, and The Bad Batch Season 1 won't help when the higher ups are making otherwise good ideas worse. Like wasting 4 out of the 12 episodes of Season 7 on these useless characters, all the while not using the original version of this story arc like they did for The Bad Batch in Season 7. Dave even co-wrote those episodes and still couldn't save it. Plus, giving a man 3 different live-action shows and an animated series to work on simultaneously will obviously lead to a significant dip in quality and creativity. The point is that Dave's contribution as showrunner and supervising director is undeniably important to the show's success, but it was thanks to George's constant involvement that the show was continually challenging itself in the quality and scale of the stories it told, as well as being responsible for the creation of the entire series. And not to mention the multitude of other directors, writers, producers, etc. that worked collaboratively to help make a series that's still regarded as the best Star Wars content since the prequel films. If you guys appreciate highly researched analysis videos like this one, support the video by sharing it with your friends.